fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. My loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. Enjoy this amazing interview because Steve Foxe returns to the mothership to talk superior Avengers from Marvel Comics. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Foxe. Thanks for coming back to the Vertical Stars Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So my pleasure. Always happy to have you on. So um, before the interview, I started looking into a little bit of all the other comic books you've made, and I've read that you have done over 100 comic books now in your career. Is that true?
Yeah, between comics and kids books, I'm well over that number if you're counting single issues and digital and everything else. I stopped trying to keep track of everything a little while ago.
So obviously you're winning. So what keeps you going, even though, like I said, you defeated the game a long time ago, apparently.
Well, I think winning is a continuous process and is very relative. But what keeps me going is a mortgage and bills and a need to feed myself and my partner and dog. No, I mean, I think any creative career is like a continuous process. I don't think success is like a linear path or a destination. I'm very lucky and grateful for all the things I have achieved, but there are ups and downs for everybody. And I think like I can definitely look back on a lot of the things I've done with a lot of surprise. Like, if you'd asked me a couple years ago if I ever thought I would write an X-Men comic, I would have said that was like a long-term goal. And now I've written, over 1,000 pages of X-Men comics. That's crazy to me, and that's really awesome. But I have a lot of goals still to accomplish in the industry. So,
So obviously, having reading comic books and books for so long, looking back, what do you think you've learned in that period of time from what you have been doing, let's say 5, 10, whatever years ago, to where you are now?
oh man, that's a broad question. I think what I just try to learn with every gig is how to best meet the opportunity on its own terms. Every book is different, every artist is different, the audience for every project is different. We're also living in such a different market than when I grew up. I'm 35. I've been reading comics since I was 5 years old. And when I was a kid, a book getting canceled at 20 issues was a flop. And now 20 issues is a huge success.
Hmm.
So I think I'm coming of age in an industry, in a moment in the industry where um, runs and stories are structured so differently than they were even 15, 20 years ago. So trying to meet that moment in different ways and make the most of 4 or 5 issue opportunities, 10-page opportunities, everything. So I've kind of built my career out of these little chunks here and there, these scattered opportunities. But I've gotten to do a lot of those and they've added up over time, like you said at the top of the interview. So I think that's something I've learned over time. But also just meeting every artist where they stand. I've talked to a lot of artists who have really enjoyed collaborating just because I leave a lot open to them or I try to talk to them before we begin a project or I really try to study their work before we start something so that I know kind of their strengths or fluencies. And I think that's something I've grown into more as I've aged in the industry.
So that's interesting talking about how times are different. And obviously we're talking about long runs, which are gone. I mean, the times where I think Ron Mars, he did like Green Lantern 48 and stopped at like 140 something. I don't know, whatever, it was an extreme or 120. It was like a very long run. Nowadays you look at something like Jed McKay on Moon Knight. He had a 30 issue run, then he had an 8 issue run, now he's up to like 5 or 6. And that nowadays is a long run. I mean, he's done almost 40 issues now. That's like massive. So
Yeah.
when you're approaching a series, do you imagine, oh, this will all do when I get to, my 20 issue thought? Or are you thinking 2 issues, 3 issues, 4 issues in advance?
Well, to be completely honest, almost every opportunity I've gotten has been in like 4 or 5 issue chunks. So I'm trying to tell complete stories in that time span. And even something like Spider-Woman, that was 10 issues, but we were approved for four as a miniseries, and then we got extended. So that was planned as a four-issue story, and then I got to do more. So it wasn't planned as a 10-issue story. So the longest I've gotten to plan out of the gate has been New Champions, and that was fun to plan something a little longer with more runway. But every time I've gotten something, it's been more of a finite opportunity and just trying to tell something fun and complete and make the most of that page space. And that's also been a big learning experience because a lot of the books I've done have been team books. And when you're doing a team book, you have limited page space and you're really trying to spread that around, sometimes five, six, seven characters. And that does really affect what you can do with them. So learning how to balance that and learning how to make the most of that has been a learning experience from something like Dark X-Men, where I did try to put a lot of people into that. And, I think I had a lot of fun with that. And I think I had a lot of high points with that, especially with Jonas Scharf on art and Frank Martin on colors. But moving into today, like doing things like New Champions and Superior Avengers, trying to pull back a little bit, cast wise, and pick my battles on how many characters I put into anything.
So, since you brought up Superior Adventure, which is going to be the bulk of what we discuss, obviously that series is very tightly tied to the event going on One World Under Doom. Now, when we think about Superior Avengers, are we looking at it as a miniseries ongoing? How many issues are we really discussing when we discuss the title?
Oh yeah, Superior Avengers is a six-issue series, so that's how it's always been planned. And it is part of the One World Under Doom event. So it was always planned to be one of the miniseries they launched with that, alongside stuff like the Thunderbolts book and the Doom's Division book. So we were part of kind of a coterie of tie-in series planned to take advantage of this event.
So, how did you get involved with Superior Avengers? Did they well, were you told about it, and how much information do you have on One World Under Doom in order to properly write yours? Which I kind of feel like that's the big tie-in series to this one, because this is the one that feels like the one that most ultimately is going to have an impact on the main event.
Oh, I mean, I think all of them have really fun things to tell, and we're all getting to carve off our own pieces of it. But I was approached by Will Moss, who's one of the editors at Marvel, quite a while ago, and I got to get the whole packet up front. So I've known the full structure of One World Under Doom for a long time, which was a fun secret to sit on for a while. Before the book was even announced, I've known how it's going to end. Um, which is the fun push and pull of being like within the machinery is that everything gets spoiled for you a really long time in advance.
Yeah.
You don't really get surprises anymore. But Ryan North is, a fantastic writer. So getting to see the whole layout of how he's been planning that. And not only that, but the document they originally gave us actually had a lot of the notes back and forth between him and Tom Brevoort. So I got getting to see how they developed it was really informative too. Um, but yeah, so I had the full laydown well in advance, and Will Moss and I got to develop the scope of this book, and it actually did go through a lot of different iterations because we knew off the bat we wanted to do something sort of in the vein of Dark Avengers, a sort of darker spin on Avengers book, a more serious tone. I'm trying to think of a word besides dark, but we're looking for the darker Avengers book for the moment to tie into this One World Under Doom event. But what we figured out really early is that you know, having characters be undercover, that's been done to death. That was the original Thunderbolts. It was an aspect of Dark Avengers, so that was already played out. Having a group of characters out to kill Doom was kind of a dead end because no one would believe for 5 seconds that Doom was in any danger in a tie-in book,
Mm.
off to the side. So that was also a dead end. So it took us a little while to land on sort of our own space to carve out. And I think what really opened it up was picking Kristoff as sort of a focal point character.
Mm.
I thought there was a lot of rich thematic material to bring Doom's adoptive son into the mix. Because if you have an event where your adoptive dad is taking over the entire world, it seems like a big missed opportunity not to tell a story about that.
Hmm.
and to bring him into the spotlight. So once he became a central character to the story, a lot of the other pieces fell into place.
Now, it's a very interesting cast of characters that we'll dive into a little more individually, but on the whole, Killmonger, Onslaught, Malekith, Abomination, all these characters. Did you determine which characters were going to be in the series? Did they tell you? And when you're determining how you're going to form the series, how did you kind of choose which pieces you needed for it?
Yeah, it was like 90-10. So I came up with cast proposals, and then what really enticed, so the original version of the cast didn't have all like one-to-one versions of characters who currently exist. Um, Originally, I was trying to use more currently defunct titles. So Killmonger was on the current list because, there's not otherwise a Killmonger currently active.
Hmm.
But that idea of them all relating to current villains was really enticing to CB Cebulski. So I ended up running with that for the whole group. Um, and from there, it was entirely my choice of which villains to pull. Obviously, I wanted them all to be A-listers, and I wanted a pretty wide swath of the Marvel Universe to be represented. So Spider-Man has a million great rogues, but I didn't want them to all be from his corner of the universe. I didn't want them to all be X-Men universe characters. So I tried to pick a little bit from here and there across the Avengers sphere and across from, different corners in the Marvel U. And I also wanted them to not feel like they each were direct descendants. So, in Killmonger, once we find out more about her background, you're going to see that she's not exactly following in the same footsteps as the current Killmonger. Doc Ock is her own spin on the legacy. And then characters like Abomination, obviously he's very different from, Emil Blonsky. So you've got characters who do fit the mold and characters who break the mold a little bit more. And then with Ghost, I also had just been really eager to introduce a Ghost who looked a little bit more like the MCU version because
Hmm.
I just thought it was interesting that no one had done it yet to get a female Ghost into the Marvel universe somehow.
Now, for the reason, if you're watching this, you may have already, they may already know that what's going on in Spirit Avengers, but assuming that they may not. For those who don't know, the characters are come from a future directly connected to 1100 Doom. However, is their future the 616 future? Is it the alternate? Is it an alternate Earth future? This is a future that we kind of because honestly, when we deal with the comic books, the idea of what a future is always in flux. I mean, there's 2099 books, and those are a totally different type of future in a different alternate world, but it's very malleable what the future looks like. So when you're thinking about the future of the 616 and where these characters come from, where like you know what I'm saying, how did you determine like where they are in the future of this book? Is it 616 that's expected to happen? Is it a 616 that like an alternate future? How are you determining it?
Yeah, so time travel is really tricky, and the thing that always amuses me about people trying to make sense of it is that ultimately you can't, right? It doesn't exist. You can't truly make time travel make sense. Um, or it doesn't exist yet. But the way I approached it is, in the first issues, you'll see when we see a glimpse of the place they come from, it doesn't get an Earth designation. So most of the time in the Marvel Universe, it's, Earth 616, Earth 71490. So we don't see that. We see Anno Doom plus 128. So it's 128 years into Doom's reign. So it is a future in which Doom's reign has continued for quite a long time, because that's what Christoph was looking to find with the time platform, a future in which Doom's reign was successful. Now, what success means is what we're really going to see in the future issues of the book. Um, as far as is it the future? Is any future the future? That's really kind of the question, right? The butterfly effect,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. Every choice made in the present is going to affect that. And also, Doom's time platform is kind of unique in the Marvel universe in that it can make permanent changes when it goes back and forth in time, unlike other methods of time travel. So you could end up giving it its own Earth designation at some point, if you wanted to carve it off. But as of now, it's being treated as a possible future for Doom's reign.
So Doom has survived for 128 years. So this is that Doom. Isn't like you think of like royalty or like an empire. It's George the Seventh. It's whatever number blah blah blah. Leopold the whatever. King Leopold, whatever the number is. This isn't like Doom 3. This is the Doom we see having survived 120 something years into the future.
It is Doom, the Sorcerer Supreme, 128 years in the future.
Oh, wow, okay, okay. So when you're thinking about these characters, because they are not going to be the characters, as you said, Killmonger isn't the Killmonger from this current 616. Um, how did you determine? You kind of had to give them a history of their own that we never saw from a future we haven't seen. So how are you determining how they got to where they are, and how much of that are we actually going to get to see?
You're going to get to see a good amount of it. By issue 4, you'll know pretty well everyone's background and who they are. So Luca Maresca is the main artist on the book, and he's doing an insane job capturing like the wide scale action of the present day sequences. But Kyle Hotz is on the book as well, or Holtz, apologies, I don't actually know. Sorry, Kyle. But Kyle is on the book doing the sequences set in the future timeline. So in issue 1, it's just a single page glimpse, but in every future issue, he's doing larger chunks of the story. So you're going to get to see a lot more of the timeline they come from, including other characters who didn't make it back to our present. So they're not the only other takes on um, villains you're going to see uh, other versions of. Um, Sorry, that's a labored sentence, but I've been outside doing yard work for like 3 hours.
No worries, no
Uh,
worries.
but yeah, so you're going to get to see other characters as well, and Kyle's depicted a really interesting version of that future. So we just teased people with it in the first issue, but you're going to get to see a lot more of it in the issues to come.
Now,
And that tease in the first issue, didn't look so great for them. So
no, no. I mean, you refer to them, and we've been referring to them as villains, most, at least in my mind, because the names of the characters come from villains of the present. I keep saying present day as if this is my present day, but the comic book continuity present day. I guess we should separate that we're not living in the Marvel universe. I guess. But are they villains because we know them as villains in the current Marvel, or are they villains of their own time? And at the moment where they come back, are they still villains of their time, or are they doing kind of like a Thunderbolt situation where they were villains, but now they're acting as our heroes?
well, something Christoph talks about is that under Doom's future, the whole concept of a villain is going to be obsolete. And that's really something that is one of the promises of One World Under Doom. And that's something that Doom kind of pitches to the world right off the bat.
Right.
Heroes and villains, that's not a concept that he's really interested in anymore. He thinks that's kind of a petty thing of the past. And so having these characters exemplify his future and his Avengers is proof positive of that because you
Mhm.
have Malekith and Onslaught out saving the world. Um, as for whether that's going to hold true, you're going to have to read the book to find out.
Mhm. Well, like I said, so far the first issue of Superior Avengers have come out, not the second yet. I'm not sure when the exact date for that, but it's not out yet. For One War Under Doom, we're up to the third issue, and so far Doom seems to be doing pretty well. Things are going well under his rule. I mean, it's to the point where you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, okay, well this isn't so bad." I mean, it's a fascist dictator with, I'm sure with a huge, massive ego and destructive ability, but so far things are going pretty well. Um, is the suggestion that he is going to fail or the world fails him in his pursuit?
Well, I can't blow up Ryan's story for him, but there are lots of twists and turns to come. And they've got a complex story. I think, when I first read the outline for it, I was impressed that it didn't go in the expected ways I thought it was going to,
Hmm.
um, because there were versions of that story to tell that could have been much simpler. And if anyone's been reading Ryan's Fantastic Four, he's always got, a slightly more clever take on things. And I
Hmm.
think that's going to hold true for folks with One World Under Doom too.
Well, I mean, obviously this is not a spoiler because it's like I said, we're up to issue 3. So if it is a spoiler, then you have bought the damn book, yeah, and you should. Um, but for One Word on Doom, my first impression when I read the first issue, and I did get to interview Ryan about the series, which was a very cool thing, was that my assumption was mind control. I was like, all right, it was mind control, blah blah blah. He got into power or some other trick. And so, but it turns out, honestly, as we read, he just kind of does a good job of making himself in charge. He's like, hey, what do you want when this happens? Okay, now I'm a leader, and it's like, okay. Um, how much do we learn about why each of our superior Avenger villains? Because I assume they did choose at some point then in in their history to side with Doom, or for at some point that's kind of why they chose these characters. Do we figure out what he sold to them to make it worth their while?
Yeah, so it is only 6 issues, and there are 6 characters plus Kristoff. So there are a couple characters who get fleshed out a lot more than the others. A few
Hmm.
of them are there to be fun and interesting and uh, colorful, and a couple others pull ahead of the pack as the more focal point characters. So a few of those will get really fleshed out backstories. The others you will find out more about who they are and where they came from, but I won't promise deep backstories for all of them. Some of them are there to have uh, fun lines and interesting powers, and not to lead deep, interesting lives.
Well, I mean, you have in the book. Okay, so I grew up. I'm an '80s '90s kid, right? So a lot of part when I dived deep into the comic books, and especially for Marvel, came in the '90s, where Onslaught had one of the coolest, biggest sagas in all of Marvel history. I love those books. I bought like pretty much. I think I have like almost every single Onslaught book that came out during that period of time. All the tie-in books, all that. I think I was buying all of them for that point. And he was visually awesome. He is as a character awesome. The onslaught from your book, is this the onslaught from that onslaught saga?
No, none of these characters are the same character.
Okay.
But the Onslaught from this book might be a character who exists in the present day, and he's the only one who might be a character who exists in the present day as well. There's the hint toward that later in the series.
Can you kind of dive into what you mean by that? So this is so it is possible he is the same, or he just is a character that exists at this time.
He might be a character who exists at this time. If you notice, he is a skeleton who is
Yes.
a floating psychic skeleton. So there's a suggestion that he is a character who currently exists, that this
Okay.
is a future iteration of him.
But this is not that onslaught.
No, it's not that
Okay.
onslaught.
How when you're thinking about the development of of this version of Onslaught. Obviously, it can't be an accident. I mean, you would have to assume that every character in the Marvel Universe knows who Onslaught was. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's like knowing who Hitler is. I mean, I assume at some point along the line, you were like, "Hey, I heard about that guy. He did a lot of bad things." Onslaught was probably at that level where he did a lot of bad things. I mean, he threw half the Marvel superheroes into an alternate pocket universe. I mean, on some level, he's a bad dude. So it has to be a very particular reason why any character would choose that man. It can't be an accident, obviously.
Yeah.
So can go into a little bit into what kind of mindset that would be to choose to be or to create yourself in Onslaught, or would that be too much into spoiler territory?
Well, I don't want to spoil too much of what's a fun little, breadcrumbs into that tease. Because one of the things is that I did want to do with this book is that I'm a big horror guy. And I think in horror movies, the more you explain about the monster, the less interesting the monster is,
Okay.
right? And these characters, in their own way, are all monsters, whether they're doing something for good or bad. And I wanted to maintain some mystery about each of them and kind of dole out information in well-paced chunks. So rather than immediately revealing their origins or, info dumping exposition off the bat, you're going to kind of pick up pieces of who they are over the issues. And like I said, by issue 4, you'll know pretty well who everyone is and where they come from. Um, So I don't want to give too much away, but we're talking about over a century in the future. A lot can happen in 100 years. A lot can happen to mutant kind in 100 years that can change where someone might stand um, in their perception of mutant kind's relationship to the rest of the world. their cynicism. Onslaught's a very cynical character in this book. He's been a lot of fun to write because he has a very acerbic attitude. He gets off a lot of sort of borderline one-liners. He really does not give a shit about what he says to the other characters and does not mind talking back to Killmonger in particular. So he's been a lot of fun. He is very different from the prior iteration of Onslaught. But once you find out sort of the past he's endured, what he's lived through, and who he may be related to, I think it'll make sense why he calls himself Onslaught.
And he's also has to be one of the heavy hitters of this book. I mean,
He's easily the most physically powerful person on the team.
obviously he's naming himself, as we said, about Onslaught, who's like one of the major baddies in the history of the Marvel Universe. He's, as you said, the most powerful of his team. He's obviously also, despite anyone who names himself Onslaught, he's a villain. Like I don't imagine Captain America goes into the future and says, you know what, I'm going to name myself Onslaught. It wouldn't make sense. So he's probably a villain. Um, why would he not be the, it's not be on a team that he's not the leader of? Is there, what does he see then in, let's say, Killmonger or whatever that says, you know what, I'm the most powerful, but however, these are the people I'm going to stand aside and take, in some ways, marching orders from.
I don't think power equates to motivation or drive.
Okay.
I think power is its own thing. I think raw power is its own thing. And once you find out more about how they're working together and why, I think that'll make a little more sense. And that's also to say, whether or not they even particularly trust each other or like working together. You're going to find out more about their working relationship as the book goes on. These are not bosom buddies. They're not, without giving too much away, these guys are not best friends. I think that's already clear from the first issue. They're not
Hmm.
necessarily, hanging out on their off time playing parlor games.
It's very clear this abomination is the most distinct, in my opinion, from the abomination we all know. But the abomination we all know is very much the bad Incredible Hulk. Visually, he seems to be almost more of a bad Captain America, with the armor and kind of like the way weaponry. How much are we going to get into his reasons for choosing to be the abomination? How much are we going to learn about him as a character and his, I guess, his history of, I mean, was he, as we're saying, a Hulk rogue gallery character in your
No,
future, or is he something else?
he's got nothing to do with the Hulk. His name is completely unrelated to that. And yeah, you'll find out his full thing. I think already from the first issue, and if the second issue's out by the time this airs, you'll see he is the most fervently pro Doom on the team. He is very enthusiastic about Doctor Doom. And that makes him a bit of an outlier on this team in his own way, and it seems unusual. It'll take a couple of issues for it to really make sense why he is with these guys. But he calls him, and I don't mind saying this, he calls himself Abomination because he has a perfectly fine, unblemished face, and he finds that unacceptable because he idolizes Doom, and Doom has a scarred, messed up face. So in Abomination's eyes, he's an abomination unto his Lord because he does not look like Doctor Doom. So he hides himself under an iron mask. He would love to be messed up like his master, but he thinks he needs to earn it.
So Christoph didn't make a complete error in who he brought into from the future. There's at least one guy who does seem to have been a good choice. Does
Well,
that
they all came back together, so they were a package deal.
okay?
Yeah.
Because
But you'll see what the dynamic is as the issues go on.
and I think the other interesting character is Christoph. Um, so Christoph, well, from the point of view of Doom, Doom seems to very be under the impression you have my bloodline, so that makes you awesome on some level. On some level, you must be awesome because there's Doom running through your blood. However,
Well,
Christoph.
to be clear though, Kristoff's an adoptive son.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so Doom took him under his wing. Doom saw his mom get killed in front of him. There's, a whole little backstory to that, but Kristoff's not biologically related to Doom, which makes their dynamic even more interesting because Doom's, chosen to keep him around and consider him a son for a very long time, which is a feat, I think, with a character who's had as many kind of ups and downs with, outright villainy as Doctor Doom has.
So why does Doctor Doom tolerate his failures the way he has, considering? Because see that having I'm not as well versed in Marvel as I am, let's say in DC. I didn't know exactly who Kristoff was. It felt like the only reason you would tolerate his bullshit is that they were a blood relation. But if he completely adopted, why does Doom tolerate Kristoff's seemingly failures? I mean, even the first pair of Avengers, he brought back a version of the Hulk that didn't go so well either. I mean, he's screwing up a lot. Why does, what's the point of Doom keeping him around?
Well, I can't speak, completely to Doom characterization because I'm not the only one writing him right now. But I think in my mind, even Doom's choice to adopt Kristoff in the first place, Doom is never wrong. So if he chose to adopt Kristoff, then he saw something in Kristoff,
Hmm.
right? So if Kristoff's messing up, then it's a temporary failure because Doom saw that potential. So
Hmm.
that potential's there, and it just has to be realized somehow. He sees the ability for Kristoff to rise to that because Doom wasn't going to make a mistake in the first place. I think that's probably part of the rationale on Doom's behalf. But there's also the ability that Doom has a bit of a soft side. He saw something horrible happen to a kid and his mom. As we know from the past, Doom has a real soft spot for his mom. He went to hell to try to find her. That's a key Doom story. So I think there's also an explanation that Doom is a little soft on Kristoff, but that doesn't mean he's ever going to show it. So
Hmm.
there are layers to that story, I think, to peel back. And I think Kristoff, he's played interesting roles back and forth in Doom mythology. He hasn't always been a central figure, but that's what's been interesting to play on here is that sort of paternal pressure that he has to live up to the Doom legacy. And no time ever is that going to be a bigger pressure than when Doom is literally ruling the world.
Is it good for Kristoff to have a father, an adopted father like Doom, who's, I mean, on the one level, it's good to not have, his father's ruined the world. That's a nice position to be in. I would assume. At the same time, the pressure to be Kristoff is immense. The pressure on himself is immense. How does he feel about being that son, as it were? Is there all just fealty? I love the guy. He put me in this position to be second to the world, thrown into the world, or is it some level of resentment saying, I don't want to have all this pressure on me. I'm not that guy.
Well, the central question, is it good to be adopted by Doctor Doom, is no, it's not. I don't think that's good for anybody. Does Kristoff question it? No. He's been raised this way since he was a child. I don't think there's any part of him, certainly not my take on him, that he is doubting that. He sees, a regal future for himself. He sees the big destiny for himself. He wants to rise to Doom's expectations. And I think that's unhealthy. I think there's a toxicity to that, but I think that's what makes him an interesting character. I think that's what makes him a rich person to dig into for this. But no, there's no part of him in my interpretation that's thinking, oh, this is unfair. I really wish I had a normal life, or I want to go join the good guys and do something different. He wants to be the next Doom. He wants to live up to that.
Is he then the fatal flaw in Doom's ultimate viewed having basically put the second to the throne, a guy who doesn't seem to be anywhere near the level of capabilities of Doom?
Well, I think that's part of the question, right? Because we're going to see in this book a timeline over 100 years in the future. So where is Kristoff, right? That's part of the question.
So when thinking about Spirit of Avengers, and like I said, I really love the first book. Um, the question in my head is, as you said, the 6 issue miniseries. If the team, let's say the team's popular that super popular that you created by issue 6, the popularity lasts, continues in. is there any discussion of the team remaining in 616 and having more stories to tell? Or is it definitely discussion of it's over at six?
I mean, who says anyone's going to be alive at the end of six?
That's depressing.
No, we've had talks about different possibilities for some of these characters, but it's going to depend on different dominoes falling in different ways. So we'll see. It's one issue at a time is how we got to take it these days.
And I mean, obviously, the other question in your Thunderbolts, and there's also a film. Everything you've created, there's potential that it's now going to have bigger, broader implications. Do you, as a writer for a book with these characters, that in your thoughts, your dreams, these characters could become, the team could become this or that in the future of Marvel or the big plans.
Oh, I mean, I don't ever think about stuff like that. It would be fun for things like that, sure, but all I'm ever thinking about is telling the best comic book story I can.
I think the characters you created are interesting, and like I said, also alone, it's just a cool character to choose. Even if it's not the same one, it's still an awesome character that you wrote. It'd be nice to see them. I mean, I only have the first issue, so I don't know what's going to happen in the next five after that. But you would think. I mean, it is Marvel, right? I mean, these characters could live in any number of alterations of history.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, it's just been a big fun book to do because so like I said before, I'm 35. I've been reading comics since I was 5. So a big influence for me was the early 2000s like widescreen action comics, like the Ultimates and the Authority. And from this, I was really pulling from the Authority of that kind of super fast, brash, kind of a team full of asshole, high octane action book. And I'd always wanted to write something like that. So this is my like team of asshole action book, where no one's a particularly redeemable character. And Luca just stepped up in such an amazing way with the fight scenes. You know, we get a little bit of it in issue 1, but in the future issues, especially issue 3, where they come into a bit of conflict with Jed's Avengers, he's just gone off the rails with the fight scene. So it's been really fun to just indulge that side of my influences and just have a lot of unlikable characters doing big, exciting feats of action.
And well, I think you've done a great job with the book so far. And I must say, I'm loving the One Word Under Doom whole event, in its entirety, just because I like how Jed has done it. Not Jed, sorry, Ryan North has done it, where it's just it you kind of can see yourself going, yeah, it's not so bad. He's doing a pretty good job so far. I mean, let's see where he goes. So what's next for you?
Yeah, well, so I've got this. I'm still writing new champions. I just finished Alien Paradiso. I'm working on a series that should be announced pretty soon. They'll be coming out later this summer, early this fall from Marvel, as well as uh, another short. And I've also got a short in the that Miss Marvel time travel thing that's coming out this summer. Lucas Warnick and I did a Phoenix story that I'm really excited for. It's just insanely gorgeous pages from Lucas. The first thing I said to Tom when it came in was, "Can we just publish this like without my words?" Like it looks good enough. But I really don't think it even needs my script over it. But that's going to be a big treat. I've also got Let This One Be a Devil coming out right now that I co-wrote with James Tynan, and that Piotr Kowalski and Brad Simpson illustrated, who were my collaborators in All Eight Eyes. That's coming out from Dark Horse Comics. And then I've got a slew of kids books coming out this fall. I've got a Kid Flash graphic novel coming out from DC, with Jerry Gaylord on art, and then I've got two spooky nonfiction books coming out from First Second, called Archives of the Unexplained, with Naomi Franquiz on one and Fran Bueno on the other. So staying busy on a couple different fronts, and then a few other projects I can't talk about yet. I
Well,
think that about covers it.
when we can talk about those projects, come back on the show. You're always awesome to talk to, and you're killing it with Superior Avengers. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Totally my pleasure. Have a great night, sir.
You too.